Welcome to On the Beach with Cedric. You may have noticed I'm not Cedrick LaFleur. I'm Joe Nemmers. I'm the guest host for tonight. And we're going to be talking about Cedric's new book, $1 Million Beach House, The Journey to an Extraordinary Life. And we'll get Cedric on here in just a second. But if you're tuning in thinking this is an HGTV show about how to build $1 million beach house, that's not going to happen. This is all about Cedric's journey from his childhood to where he is today. All the lessons he learned, the great examples he's given us in the book of things to think about, and how he and Tammy arrived at $1 million beach house in Houston, completely paid for. So that's the big part of the story we're going to go through today from beginning up until now. I'm going to introduce Cedric now. In a second, I'm not going to read his biography because that would take another 15 minutes. But I'm going to introduce him the way I like to and how I have before on his programs, which is I always describe Cedric as a Renaissance man. A Renaissance man or a Renaissance person is someone who has a very broad range of interests. They can do a lot of things well. It takes a lot of different skill sets, for example, and we'll talk about this as we go chronologically through Cedric's book. He was in the Air Force for 7 years. He was at Abbott Laboratories for almost 22 years, and he's been an entrepreneur now for about 9 years. And each of those three things, being in the military, being in the corporate world, and being an entrepreneur, are as different from each other as one could possibly find. And they have their own language, their own history, their own culture, their own everything. And it takes a very special person to do all three very well. I can only do two. I did the military and corporate. Couldn't imagine myself being an entrepreneur. So with that, let's introduce our guest and our host, Cedric LaFleur.
Well, hello, everyone.
There he is, live from the $1 Million Beach House.
Well, thank you very much, Joe, for introducing me and welcoming me to the show.
Sure thing. You want to explain why we're both in tuxedos here this evening?
Well, you know, when Joe Nemmers shows up, one has to dress appropriately. All right. For those of you who don't know, Joe and I worked at Abbott together for many, many years. Joe is a retired corporate president for Abbott Laboratories, and he's a dear friend of mine. And I'm excited to be interviewed by Joe tonight. Joe is also a 10-time author. And, you know, Joe, if you look in the sky, you see a plane, just know Joe's probably in a plane somewhere flying.
Hey, anytime we have $1 million in the book title and we're celebrating a new book, we got to get dressed up like this.
Absolutely.
I just don't have
the tie. I took the tie out of retirement for one night.
I know you've retired your bow ties for some reason, but it's your signature mark. So, well, thanks for having us. You're in the Lion's Den, which is your new office. I think this is your first broadcast from your new home. And tell us why it's the Lion's Den, and tell us a little bit about it.
So, you know, when you think of the lion, you know, the lion is really the king of the jungle. And it's not because the lion is the biggest, but the lion is the one that's going to do the most grinding. The lion understands that when he goes out and hunts, the lion knows that not only will he eat, but his family will eat as well.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about being the top of the jungle, the king of the jungle. My office is the king of this house. So it's at the top of this house. So it is called appropriately the Lion's Den. This is where the grinding happens.
That's pretty good. Well, it's like a cupola that sits at the very top of your house all by itself, right?
Yes. And I get to see, some nice views here. I'll turn it this way. You can see the back there, that's the water. So I'm getting to look at this water every day, all day, and twice on Sunday. And so I absolutely love it. It's fun. I'll have to invite everyone over. If you're on the line tonight, I'll have to invite you over one time.
Okay. We're all looking forward to that. So let's get into the book, because the book is really your life story up until this point. It's about all the things that you've endured in your life and you've learned from your hardships, your successes, and there's a lot of great information in here. I should say at the outset that this book, if you haven't read it yet, it's coming out this week. If you're 22 and you're looking for guidance on a number of subjects, get the book. If you're 62 and you're looking for guidance on a number of subjects, get the book. There's things in here about parenting, about financial control. There's all kinds of good stuff. in the book. And the one thing I told Cedric the other day that I liked about it when I read it was when I was reading it, I could hear him speaking. So it's in his authentic voice. A lot of authors don't do that. And so when you read it, if you know Cedric, it's right there on the pages, which is really terrific.
That's right. You'll have old Ceddy with you all the time.
That's right. So let's start by talking about the dedication to the book. As an author myself, I'm always fascinated how people dedicate books. You dedicated this one to your mom, to your maternal grandparents, and to Tammy. And were there more people you considered? How did you discern this, and how did you come up with those three, and how long did it take you to do the dedication?
Yeah, you know, I initially thought about going away, totally away from family. But as I was thinking through the book itself, and the dedication actually was one of the last things I did. As I was thinking through the book, I said, this is more appropriate for family. Without my mother, first of all, and my grandparents, there would be no Cedric.
No.
And then as I continued into adulthood, Tammy is, has been the backbone really to help me along this journey. And so it was appropriate that I dedicate the book to them, because they're the ones that make sure that I'm where I'm at today.
One of the things you talk about up front, we're not going to get into them all now, but we're going to see them in the threads of the book, are what you call the 6 power stories. And those would be faith, trust, hope, confidence, love, and attitude. And in all of your stories from your very beginning until now. So keep that in mind, audience, as we go through. You're going to hear Cedric talk about that more and more. We're going to talk about chapter 1, which is goal setting. Now, one of the things that you said in this book is that you started setting goals the day you were born. So I give you credit for a lot of things, and I would believe a lot of things about you, but I'm not so sure you set goals on your first day. But I think your point was you've been a goal setter since your very earliest days. And we were laughing before about how there are adults today that can't set goals. How did you start setting goals at such a young age?
Yeah, I can't remember a single moment someone told me, hey, you need to set goals. I just remember having goals. I had goals for who I wanted to be friends with and how many people I wanted to be friends with. I had a list of people that I wanted to be friends with. And then I didn't know it was called being intentional back then, but today I know that it's called being intentional. Then I on purpose went to make friends with those people. Yeah. Right. And I didn't want to be popular. I just wanted to have a certain number of friends. And I was very intentional about some kind of way being a friend with a certain people. Either I would sit by them in the classroom, or for recess or for lunch, I would go up and talk to them. And that's how I became friends with people. And if I made friends with you, I was a lifelong friend. I mean, still today, the people that I'm closest to are people I was friends with since elementary school.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's terrific. One of the things you talk about in the goal setting process early on, and this is important because this is about your life and it's about kind of the rough starts you had. You had a goal of living with your maternal grandparents and a dream actually to live with them. So explain to us what that's about and what ended up happening with that.
Yeah. So, when I was 5, I was living with my mother and she had a boyfriend he was just horrible. There's no other way to put it. But he would lock my brother and I in a closet, in a dark closet, when we would do things that he didn't like. Imagine, 5-year-old kids, we were playing, making noise, jumping around here and all this type of stuff. And he'd get upset about that stuff and, march us right to the closet. And there was no lock on the door, but we couldn't open it. We were forbidden to open it. It was dark in there. And, I don't know if my brother was scared, but I know that I was scared. And we would be in there sometime for an hour or two.
And you were how old at that time?
I was 5.
Ooh.
And my older sister was living with my grandparents, and I kept begging them to let me go live with them. And, eventually that came true. But I had a prayer every night. My mom would have us say prayers, but I'd get on my knees and say a prayer. Then when I get into bed and she'd leave, I would pray another prayer. And it would, please, Lord, let Mama Effie and Pop come get me. And every night I would drink, I would say that. and then dreamed that that's where I was living. And one Saturday they called and said, my grandmother told my mom she was coming to get me, and I got on the phone and she told me that I was coming to live with them. And literally, as soon as I hung up the phone, I went in the room and I packed my clothes. And I had a little small suitcase. I packed everything I had in that suitcase. And my mom said, I started watching. She goes, well, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to go sit outside. She goes, well, they're coming tomorrow. So I had to wait till the next morning. Got up, very first thing Sunday morning, I went and sit on the porch. And she goes, you know, they're not coming until after church. Now, you got to remember, in the 70s, people go to church at 9 in the morning, and they wouldn't get out till, 1, 2 o'clock.
Yeah, that's right.
But I said, I'm sitting on the porch until they come because I didn't want them to miss me. And I sat there when my grandfather's car pulled up. I ran to the car and got in, and he said, well, we're going to visit your mom. I said, well, you guys go ahead. And I sat in the car. I said I was never setting foot back in that place again. Yeah. And I never did. I write about it in the book. I said, my mom said, hey, well, leave some clothes here so you can come visit me. And I told her I'm never coming back. And she goes, well, not even to see me. I told her, no, you can come see me. Yeah. And she knew that she was laughing, but she knew that I was serious. And I never did.
Well, we're going to get a chance to talk about your maternal grandparents a little bit later throughout the book and the rather extraordinary role they had in your life. And I suspect it has, as you talk about goal setting, you have a couple of guides that you try to give people. One of them is, or two of them are, being positive about your goal setting and making your goals personal to you. Talk a little bit about both of those.
Yeah. So, when you're goal setting, you need to set goals that reflect your dreams and your goals. So you have to, ask yourself, is this my dream and is this my goal? If it's not yours, then it's not personal. If it's not yours, then what's going to happen is when the going gets tough, when you don't reach that goal right away, you're going to quit. You're going to give up. So it has to be personal so that 2 months from now, 3 months from now, a year from now, you're still working on it. If it's personal, you're going to keep going. You see, I knew that I wanted to be a businessman when I was growing. I didn't know what a businessman was, but I knew that on TV, the show Leave It to Beaver. Now, I know there's some people that's watching. They don't know what Leave It to Beaver is, right? Like Kendrick is watching. He knows who that is.
Better look it up.
Yeah. Nicole, Dr. Nick is watching. She doesn't know who Leave It to Beaver is. Well, their dad would dress up in this suit and he'd have a briefcase. Yep. And that was my idea of a businessman. So that's who I imagined I was when I was locked in those closet, when I was going through things. So my goals were very personal and I would not give up on those. So you have to make your goals positive and personal. Say that with me, positive and personal.
Positive and personal. Now, you're a dreamer. You've been a dreamer since you were a little kid. You're still a dreamer today. It's how you are where you are today. Talk about the relationship between dreaming and goals and how that works.
Yeah, and I, I'm a Pisces, by zodiac sign is Pisces,
right. And Pisces write goals when they're in the crib. We
That's right. We are naturally dreamers, right? As a child, I can envision myself living somewhere else, and I didn't know what to expect. But when I would go cut yards with my grandfather, or I would go to the people's house that my grandmother would clean, I would envision and dream that was my house. I would sit there. I had to be quiet all day when she was cleaning, but I would envision that was my house, what I would do, what I would be doing in that house, what my toys would look like in that house. And we were cutting yards, and we used to call them white people yard. And when I was out there cutting the grass or pulling weeds, I would imagine that was my yard that I was pulling weeds for. My grandfather used to always say, look, son, I didn't get an education, but this is why you need to get education so that you don't have to do this. Yeah. And so that could have been his words right there, could have been the reason why I started dreaming about some future. Hadn't really thought about that till just now.
You know, my takeaway on this first chapter on goals is that you had a tough early childhood. It got better when you went to live with your grandparents, but you dreamed, you overcame, you made things possible for yourself. You saw a way out and you just kept doing that. And I think as I've known you over time, those skill sets have been there the whole time. You probably honed them at a very early age because of that first situation.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about motivation, which is the next one up. And one of the things you talk about here, which is so true, is you can't rely on external motivation. You have to have personal motivation to get your goals done, drive yourself through life. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. You know, motivation is external. Motivation is internal, right? So you have to be motivated to do something, to go somewhere, to get yourself up every day, right? No one can motivate you to get up. They can inspire you, but they can't motivate you.
Right.
So you have to constantly think about your personal dream. When it's your personal dream, you get excited, you get motivated, you get pumped up just because it's your dream and you're going after it and you're doing things, right? And so I always like to, for myself, think about what it is I want to accomplish next. And then guess what? No matter if I'm ready or not, I go after it. And I don't let my thoughts of I can't do it yet, or my thoughts of I'm not good enough yet, get in the way. See, a lot of people want to, and this is where their motivation gets derailed, is because they start thinking about what all they have to do to get there. They start thinking about they're not ready yet, instead of just saying, let me just go and do it.
Right.
And try it. And all of a sudden you might realize that, boom, you can do it.
So we're sort of following you chronologically. We've kind of left your early childhood and dream setting and living with your grandparents. There's a story you tell about picking a junior high school that goes to personal motivation, everything you just talked about. So tell us that story.
Yeah. So, you know, I was at Pearl Watson Middle School and my 7th grade year, and then my 8th grade year, my sister went to another school, and she wanted to go to school that it was like the rival school. Well, my mom wanted me to go to the same school with her, and I refused. And now my mom was one that she knew I needed to have the opportunity for debate. So she gave me that opportunity, right? And it wasn't just me saying I don't want to because I don't want to. It was I had to give her some very specific reasons why I didn't want to. And so we sat and we debated it for a long time, and I gave her some reasons. And to her credit, she allowed me to stay at the school. Notice I said she allowed me to, because she could have made the decision to say, nope, you're going over there. But one of the things I did tell her at the end before my time was up, I said, 1, I'm not going to make any friends. I said, 2, I'm not going to play in a band. And I knew that she had just paid $300 for a new trumpet, and she didn't have $300 to waste. So my argument was strong. But those are the 2 things that I told her. I wasn't going to make friends, and I wasn't going to play in a band. And when I was done, she said, she thought about it for a little bit, and then she says, okay, well, you can stay there, but here's some things you're going to have to do. Right. And I was happy with that. I was fine with that. But she allowed me to speak my voice.
Well, that's good. You talk about the idea of a peak moment, P-E-A-K, peak moment. Tell us what that is. And I know we talked earlier about you and Tammy had a peak moment at one time that's helped define where you are today. So let's talk about those for a second. Yeah.
So, you know, peak moments are positive moments that happen in your life. You got to remember, peak moments create a sense of achievement and encourages you to seek that feeling over and over and over again, right? And now peak moments are not just relegated to, you know, one accomplishment or a work accomplishment. There are strong positive memories that create this positive feeling that you have. So, for example, if you're going to run a marathon, right, that's a peak moment for some people, right? For me, getting married was a peak moment. Having a child at an early age was a peak moment, right? And those were, some people may call them a pivotal moment,
Right.
but I like peak because I'm thinking of mountaintop, being at the top of the mountain, something that's exciting, something that's positive, something that I want to do all over again and again and again. And it keeps me going, keeps you motivated. So I write about that in the book, and I share some more of my peak moments in the book. One of them was going to Washington Marion High School my senior year, right? And there was a whole debate that was in the book that I talk about as well. But I also give you an opportunity to write down some of your peak moments in the book, because it's important that you go back and remember those things so that you get that feeling all over again.
Yeah, it's good to point that out at the end of almost every chapter in here. There's Cedrick gives little exercises for people to go through, and you can write things down, and it's actually a really good way to do that.
Yeah, you know why I did that, Joe, is because I didn't want this just to be a book. People think this is a book of just talking about Cedrick. No, I want this to be a living and breathing guide for you to, whether you're talking about goal setting, we're talking about peak moments, we're talking about finances. And at the end of the book, I give you an opportunity to start writing your own book, right? Yeah. I wanted people to be able to go back and use it over and over and over again. Right.
You're talking here about the usefulness of tracking goals. It's not enough just to write a goal, put it away, and then come back and look at it a year later. But tracking goals, let's talk about that for a second, because it's always something that people struggle with.
Yeah, you know, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done.
That's
right. Right. So it's important to track a goal, not only for you to see it, but also for you to understand if you've actually made progress. How did you know if you got from point A to point B, C, D, if you've not tracked it, right? And here's, some people say, well, you know what, I have it all in my head. Well, guess what? Your memory changes. Your memory flash, you know, you get 56, sometimes that memory goes away. But if it's written down on paper,
probably a little older. What did you just say? You're right.
You know, if I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it has to happen. You have to track it and write it down.
Absolutely. And the other part of tracking the goal is, and writing it down, is you have to use what we call I statements, just the letter I, right? To reinforce that the goal is personal. See, I had a goal of, I will go to Washington Marion High School. I will become a wealthy businessman. Now, I'm still working on the wealthy part, but I'm a businessman.
You're
right?
Pretty well there. Yeah. No, you're right. It's a great way to be able to look at it. In your next chapter, it's titled Fatherhood and Men. And it's got some great stories in there. And you talk about dad moments, and you talk about how being a father has helped really define your life from the point you had your daughter and then later on when you had Patrick. Talk about dad moments and give us a dad moment from each of your two kids.
Yeah. So, you know, being a father, one, is an awesome responsibility, a challenge, and I love every bit of it. And you know, one of the things I talk about or say in the book is any man can become a father. See, anybody can just, you know, donate their sperm to become a father, but it takes a real man to become a daddy, right? And the daddy is a person who spends time with their kids, and it's just not about just throwing money at kids. It's about spending quality time with them, is being present in their life. And because I didn't have that, I made a choice at a young age that if I ever had kids, I was going to be that dad that I never had. Now, I had my grandfather, and I love him, and he did some wonderful things. He was a role model for me, but it's not the same as a young boy having his dad in his life, right? And so dad moments is what I call them in the book. Those are moments where we actually share experiences with your kids, where you create these special moments with you and your kid. And, you know, when my daughter was little, Tammy was going to school. And so, because, you know, she was still in high school when we got married. Oh, right. She was at school, and I was taking care of the baby. I was combing her hair. I was making the bottle. I was changing her diaper, and I write about it in the book. I was watching the Oliver North congressional hearings, and she was, she didn't know what she was watching. She was a newborn, but we would spend that time together, and I'd take breaks, and I mean, she was so little, she didn't remember this either. But I bought a swimming pool, and I'd have to hold her just so her feet could be in the pool, and we'd sit in the yard and just get in the pool and play. While I was playing, she was more just like, But those are dad moments, right? Dad moments are, I have dad moments with my son, and one of them that is just, we were living in Palm Bay, and my kids were outside playing in the driveway. And I walked outside and I saw them playing, and I called my son over and I said, "Hey, Patrick, what are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I'm playing." And I looked at him, Joe, and I said, "Do you know that you're special?" And his eyes got really big. And he said, "I'm special?" And I said, "Yes, son, you are special." And I could tell the way his eyes got big. It was etched in my head. I'll never forget it, right? That was one of those things for him that was pivotal at that time, right? For his dad to say that he was special. Those are the dad moments I'm talking about. I have other times where, we were just me and the kids living in Texas, and we would experience different things. We didn't have much money, but we'd go to the dollar movie theater. I found a dollar movie theater, and that's where we would go on Saturdays. I'd find ways to get them to help put up groceries for me. This contest, right? Those are dad moments that I can't pay for those moments. I can only experience those moments, right? I'm going to have those forever. Some my kids don't remember, but I'm going to have them. I'll be able to tell those, and I'll be a grandfather here soon, and I'll be able to tell my grandson about those.
Can you give us an update on that, by the way?
Yeah. So any day now.
It is.
Yes,
wow.
Any day now. So hopefully it's not doing this live, because I'll have to go.
Well, with your multimedia presence, I don't think it'll be too long before everybody knows what's going on. So you and I have talked a lot before about the elders in your family, your aunts and uncles, your grandparents, older, wiser, told you great things, gave you life examples, told you one or two things that may have changed your life. Your grandfather, who you call Pop, was obviously not your dad, but he filled a great role. And you're talking in the book about leadership examples of fatherhood that both Pop and your Uncle Paul taught you. Maybe a story or so about those two, because it's good stuff. Yeah,
and I'm gonna do that. But before I do that, for men who are listening, I want to talk directly to you about this chapter that I wrote in the book. I specifically wanted this chapter to be for men to bond and to think about the things that they can do with and for their kids. I want to say a couple of things. One, men can never babysit their kids. There's no such thing as babysitting your kids. They're your kids, so you're taking care of them, right? I tell about a story in the book where I took the kids and moved to Texas, and Tammy was back in Florida finishing her internship, right? It wasn't, I put a question in the book around this and said, how many of you would have made that decision to do that, right? My kids were in first grade and fourth grade. That's a big responsibility for most men.
But let's do a little more detail on that, because it is an interesting story. You had moved to Texas. You'd moved to Dallas, take a job with Abbott. Tammy had to go back to Florida and finish her schooling another year. You made the decision to stay with the children by yourself. And that's where this all comes from, which is a really brave decision to make for both of you, but it was interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And Tammy, we had moved to Houston, to Dallas, and Tammy came with me, and it was a pivotal moment. We went to church with the guy that was like the Abbott sponsor for me. And we left their house, and she said, "Man, I'll be glad when we get like them." And we are, I'm done with school, and we're together, and we're in our careers and all this type of stuff. And I stopped the car, pulled over on the side of the road, because it just kind of like made me upset right then in the moment. I was like, "Look, You're not ready for that yet, because if you are, you would be back in Florida finishing your internship. It's going to take you 12 months to do your internship versus sitting here for 12 months and then hoping that they'll let you in a hospital here for the internship. Right. Her question to me was, well, what are we going to do about the kids? I said, I'll take care of the kids. They're mine. She goes, well, how are you going to do that? I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'm not worried about that. But if you want to be done, then you'll go back to Florida and do that. The next day, she left and went back to Florida. And I told her, I said, look, this is going to be 12 months. 24 months from now, we're going to look back and laugh at this and say, man, what an experience, right? But guess what? We did it. We came through it. The kids survived. I survived. Yeah, everything was great. And, you know, my daughter was getting close to that age for little girls. And I told my Avid coworkers, the ladies, I said, if I have a problem, I'm going to need you. And they were all on board, right? But my point is, men, we need to take responsibility for our kids and be the daddy that they need, not just the father, a donator. Okay. But now to your question around my grandfather and my uncle. My grandfather, man, he's everything. He was the man to our family. And yeah, people respected him because of who he was.
He's been gone a while now, right?
Yeah, 1983, he passed away.
So he had a pretty positive impact on you at from the very earliest moment of your life until your formative years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and your uncle,
absolutely.
Your Uncle Paul.
Yeah, so my Uncle Paul, that was my dad's brother, and he was the fun uncle. I still talk to him. I just talked to him last week. And he was always buying little toys before. They didn't have kids until later in life. And so when we would go over, he was the one you'd roll around on the floor and play with, and he have all these toys. And he was just a fun uncle. And he called me just the other day to say, hey, Cedrick, guess what? So there's this store in Louisiana called Best Stop, and it's coming to Texas, and they have all these Louisiana foods. And he's like, guess what? They're coming next month. He goes, so get your car ready, and we're going to have to take that ride. You know, he is just that guy. And he's way up there in age now, but he's still the jovial uncle that I remember, and they talk about it a lot now. He got married. He and my Aunt Alice got married. I was like 5 or 6. And during their wedding, I went to them. I don't remember this, but they keep telling me about it. I went up to him and said, Uncle Paul, I want to go take a ride. And he had to leave the wedding and take me for a ride in his car.
Let's close on this chapter. You have a wonderful line at the kind of end of this chapter where you say, becoming a father is a gift, but becoming a daddy is a choice. So for our audience, I really like that line. I thought it was wonderful. And I texted Cedrick over the weekend, and I said, is that yours, or did you borrow it from somebody? And he sent me this capital letters back. It is mine. So pride of authorship is definitely there. But that's a wonderful line. Becoming a father is a gift, becoming a daddy is a choice. That's everything that you just talked about.
Absolutely, yes.
Let's talk about winning with money. We have $1 million beach house. You got there, have it paid off for a reason, because you've been following certain strategies a good part of your life. Your grandfather, Pop, taught you about money, taught you a lot about money. Give us an example or two of what he told you.
Yeah, so he would always say, if you can't pay cash for it, son, you don't need it. He said, you don't need a checkbook if you pay cash. And he would, you get money and little kids want to go spend it. And he go, don't let that money burn a hole in your pocket. Right. And, we would tease him that he could get change from a penny. Because he was just that tight. I mean, one thing he showed me, he took me to go buy a truck one time, and he paid $6,000 cash for it. And he was reinforcing what he was saying. And he goes, son, you see, if you can't if you can't pay cash for something, that means you don't need it, and you need to save your money until you can get it. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I was that age, I'm like most kids. I wasn't paying attention to that. I was, I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't really care. I just knew he was getting a new truck. But later in life, that became important and significant to me.
Talking about money early in your life, and I know early in your married life, you were looking for financial discipline. You looked for things to help you manage money. But you have some examples in the book about some tough things that you and Tammy went through trying to maintain spending habits, because it's not as easy as it looks, even if you've got somebody to try to guide you. So talk about that for a second.
Yeah, it's very easy to get off track financially, right? We built this house in Florida, and we were living a life, and you'd go into a place and they say, oh yeah, you have good credit here. It's only going to cost you $10 a month. It's going to cost you $20 a month, $12 a month, $15 a month. And you think, okay, that's no big deal, right? Until all those little monthly payments add up to, a lot of money per month. And we realized that we were in that $10 a month type category. Okay. And one day, it hit me. I woke up and I was just like, I don't even have the money to pay the bills that's coming in, even though it's only $12, $10, $50, whatever it was. Yeah. Right. And that's when it was a God wink, really. A commercial came on TV. And it was this guy, Charles J. Givens. And Charles J. Givens was around before Dave Ramsey.
This is Wealth Without Risk, is what it's called. Wealth Without Risk.
Wealth Without Risk was the book. Yeah. He was on a commercial and he was like, are you tired of being broken? Are you tired of this? Are you tired of that? And I was like, man, he's talking to me. Yeah, I'm tired of all of those things. Right. And I had to drive 2 hours every Saturday to go and see him in Orlando. And he said it was going to cost $200 for his system. Now you could buy the book, but his whole system was going to be $200. Well, guess what, Joe? I'm sitting in a $100,000 house in 1996. I'm got 2 new cars in the driveway. I didn't have $200. I mean, that's just pathetic, right? And we came up to $200, and he said, if you do this, it's going to change the rest of your life. We said, but you got to follow the process. And here's the thing. We started in the book, so that you know that I'm not just saying this. I actually have copies of the forms I filled out. I put them in the book because I want you to see, right? So we started following that process, and it took us a while, but we came out on the other side of it, right? And today, Dave Ramsey tells the exact same stories. I still have the Charles J. Givens system here at my house. I still have it, right? But Dave Ramsey has the 7 baby steps. I've added one to that, which I put in the book, by the way. Those steps work. Some people say that they're pie in the sky. I'm telling you, they work. I've been there. I've been broke. I've been without. And I know I followed those steps. So I know that they work. I'm not saying what I just read in the book. I'm telling you what I had to do.
At the end of that chapter, you have a great quote from a mutual friend of ours, Ken Thornton, where he told you, stop looking at the calendar and start looking at your watch. What did that mean to you when he told you that?
Yeah, that means get laser focused, right? We look at the big old calendar and we're looking at, the 1st, the 15th. I'm going to do it by the 30th. No. Look right here at your watch. In 1 hour, what am I going to get done? In 30 minutes, what am I going to get done? In 2 hours, what am I going to get done? I'm going to get done, right? So it's helping you to take this big picture view and get laser focused. When you get laser focused, man, all of a sudden your process is changing. When I talk about time management, you got to be laser focused in order to have good time management skills. You talk about winning with money, you have to get laser focused on telling every dollar where to go, what to do. And that's why Tammy is here, right? Because I'm not great at this monthly money management stuff. That's Tammy's deal, right? I can tell you all about it, but she's great at it. Now the investment, the long-term part, boom, that's where I'm good at. I'm
Yeah, you and I are
really good, Joe, with telling you where my weaknesses are.
Yes.
And I understand them,
Right.
but I have someone that helps me with those.
That's right. Speaking of laser focus and time management, we're going to move up the questions a little bit so we keep moving through here. Chapter 5 is time management, ironically enough. And you talk in there about the notion of personal productivity. And you and I have discussed, when we think about productivity, we think about a company making something cheaper, faster, better, or whatever. But we don't think about ourselves in terms of our personal productivity. So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So, one, time waits for no one. Improving your time management strategies is going to help increase your productivity in your personal life, in your professional life, in your social life. If you're out there dating, if you understand how to control your time, you're going to have more time for those things, right? It's a crucial part of everything that we do. It's a crucial, because time doesn't stop, and time is all about money, right? You talk about time, value, money. Well, when you think of time, your time, that's money. So if you're wasting it, you're wasting money. And if you're wasting money, you're wasting time.
That's right.
See, it's a time management is the key to getting things done. It's the simplest way I can put it. So stop chasing everything and start chasing the right thing. Stop doing everything for everybody else and start doing the things for yourself. I give you an exercise, an activity to do in the book around this stop and start and how you go to another level. You have to be very intentional.
Right. There's that word again. You use intentionality quite frequently through the book, and as we see you in doing all kinds of other things. Earlier, you talked about just do it. Stop horsing around with just do it. You have a section in there called Just Do It. And you talk about removing clutter and distractions from your life, which is what you were just talking about a second ago. You also talk about the need to know your energy, that you have to know what you can and cannot accomplish with what you do. Now, I laughed when I read that because I don't know how you do what you do, because one moment you're in Louisiana, the next you're in Dallas, then you're back in Houston, and it's all the same day. So how do you know your energy and how do you manage it?
Yeah, so your energy level is really all about knowing when you are most effective. So let me give you an example. Some people are early morning people, right? When you get up early in the morning and you can go and you can get a whole lot of stuff done before 9 a.m., right? Well, some people are night owls. And for me, I'm a night owl. I thrive late nights while everybody else is asleep. I'm grinding.
I know we see it on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube the next morning. It's first thing on my phone is a message from Cedric.
I just want you to know that I'm up. Yeah, when you get up at 3, I was already up at 2. When my kids were little, I used to tell them, no matter what time you get up, I'm always going to be up before you, right?
That's one thing they need to know. Now, you talk about what you call the 4 different laws, and you've talked a little bit about it, but we're going to talk some more in a second. But talk about buy-in, timing, addition, and sacrifice. Those are 4 different things, but they parallel everything you're doing.
Absolutely. Those are leadership principles, really. The law of influence is, it states that, these are John Maxwell leadership laws. Law of influence says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So when I think of my grandfather and I think of you, Joe, that's what I think of. But that's who I think of, right? When I think of the law of buy-in, the law of buy-in says people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision.
That's right.
All right. And if I don't buy into you as a leader, I don't care what vision you're casting, I'm not going to buy into it, right? And Leo Serrano, you know Leo. Mm-hmm. Right. Leo Serrano is the guy that I think of. I write about him in the book. I write about you in the book as well. And he's the guy I think of. Right. When I think of the law of timing, it says when to lead is as important as what to do and where to go. Now, I write about this story about my very first sales leader. You know him as well, Bill Minix. Right. The dude was
ex-military.
Yeah, ex-military. He was an awesome sales leader for me. And I read about an example in a book where he challenged me on a contract. And, you know, when you get sales, you come with a contract, right? You think it's a great deal, right? Well, he looks at it as my sales leader and he goes, "No, we're not doing this." And I was like, "Well, wait a minute." What's the deal? And he challenged me on it. And I thought I was going to call his bluff. I said, "Well, you call the customer and tell her we're not doing this." And he says, "Okay, give me her number." And he called her right on the spot. And they had a conversation. I walked you through the conversation in the book, but they had a conversation, and boom, all of a sudden she added the stuff that he wanted to add. Now that's it. That's the mark of a sales leader, right? And but in that moment, Joe, I realized, wow, my eyes were open to something different. And so it turned out good, but when to lead is as important as what to do and where to do it. And he was demonstrating, you know, some leaders will just say, "Go do this, go do that." But he was showing me he can walk the talk. Right.
Which brings up our next chapter, which is all about people. And you've got bills in there. You've got examples of people. Talk briefly about what a life champion is. And also, what's a drainer? What's a drainer and what's a filler? Because these are great, funny stories.
Yeah. Well, you know, everybody knows that you need to have people in your life who are champions for you, right? A lot of times we go through life thinking we can do it by ourselves, and we really can't do things by ourselves. We need other people to help us, right? So life champion are positive people who help us get things done. They're the wind beneath our wings is a good way to put this. But when I talk about drainers and fillers in the book, look, there are people who, you know, everybody out there, think of a person right now who they called you at 2:00 in the morning on a Wednesday. You look at the phone and you go, "Oh no, not that person. I can't do it right now." Right? That person's a drainer. They're draining energy from you. They're draining you. Right? Now the person that same time, but another person calls you and you say, "Oh yeah, I gotta talk to this person." That means they're adding value to you. That means they're a filler. They fill your cup. They make you feel better. They help you feel stronger, faster. They're positive-minded individuals, not drama-minded individuals.
Right.
Right. We need more fillers in our lives and less drainers in our lives. So I'll give you some questions to ask yourself. One, are you a filler or a drainer?
Right.
You know, and then two, how do you know if that person is a filler or a drainer? I'll talk about that in the book.
Yeah. Let's talk about career for a second. I mentioned in your introduction, you were in the Air Force for 7 years. You were at Abbott almost 22, and now you've been an entrepreneur. Two stories in the Air Force I want to talk to you about. And for people who aren't in the military, what Cedrick is going to describe in a minute is pretty unusual. But he'd been in a while. He still had more time to go, but he wanted to get out and end his contract in the Air Force early. And somehow he managed to get a hold of the colonel, the commanding officer at a different place that handled assignments. And outside of his own chain of command, he got approval to get out of the Air Force sooner, which I'd never heard, because I was in the Army. I never heard of anybody ever did. So I want you to talk about that and then go right into the fact that when you were still in the Air Force, you got a job at a hospital as a lab tech, and that really kind of changed the next pivotal moment of your career. So let's talk about both of those.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right, Joe. That was it had to be one of those God winks. I put God winks in the book as well, because I wanted to get out a year early. I went in with a mission. I needed a place so I could have full-time benefits and they would pay for my education. Right. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. Now it was time for me to go on to greater and bigger things. And I reached out to our personnel at Randolph Air Force Base, and there's a colonel who's in charge of all of the hospital laboratory personnel. And just so happened, I called and he picked up the phone. Now, normally the colonel is not picking up the phone.
No, never.
Right. Well, he picked up the phone and I asked him, I said, "Hey, look, I said, one, what is our service level like today? And if someone wanted to get out early, would that be approved?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, so what does that person have to do?" And he told me, he walked me through the steps. And guess what? I love following steps.
Well, your own chain of command wasn't very happy with you, were they?
Well, they didn't know until I had 2 weeks left.
No, that's what I mean when you told me.
Exactly. They weren't happy, but this is Cedric's world.
That's right. Forget you'd been in 7 years already. That was enough time.
I donated my time to my country.
So you get a job in a hospital and you moved up that organization, became a quality manager, and that started you thinking, I want to work maybe for a corporation in laboratory diagnostics, and that led you to Abbott. I didn't ever realize this about you, that you did that. That's what I call a pivotal moment. If that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today if you hadn't done that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I wanted to think about what I was going to do after I got out of the Air Force. So actually a couple of years before I got out, I actually had that job, and the Air Force was fine with it as long as it didn't interfere with my duties. But the reason I left that hospital, because I was loving the responsibility I was having. However, it was, I can't take that resume to the bank.
No.
Somehow they don't care about that.
No, they don't.
So I went to my supervisor and I said, look, I need a pay raise. All this stuff you're giving me for the responsibility is great, but I need a pay raise, and here's what I think I'm worth. And she took it up. And then the lab director also took it up to the VP of HR, and they came back after about a month and said no. And I said, no problem. I said, today is your 6-month notice. And that's what I literally said. And they said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, in 6 months, I won't be here. And I proceeded to go in the lab, and I went to every vendor that we had, and I wrote their number down, and I called every vendor to find out, their HR process. And just so happened I got my first job offer was from Beckman Coulter. They wanted me to move down to South Florida, but I was great with the salary, but they said they wanted me to pay for my own move. And I was like, wait a minute, you don't want me? And here's what I literally told them. I said, it's a bold move, but I said this. I said, look, you're a multi-billion-dollar company. You're not even going to pay me $100,000, and you're asking me to pay for my own move. I said, you obviously don't want me. And we hung up the phone, and that was that. 2 weeks later, April Fool's Day, 1996, I get a phone call from Abbott Laboratories. And literally, Joe, the first 2 minutes, Christy Schultz had to prove to me that this was not an April Fool's joke. And then the rest is history. Yeah.
Well, that's terrific. One of the things you talk about, you have some big brother moments. You have some things you talk about in the book about working with difficult leaders. And you and I have discussed that you can sometimes learn things from difficult leaders or bad leaders. You don't want to make a habit out of it, but every once in a while we can. And even in a big company, you're going to come into it. We mostly had good leaders, but we each had some that were not good. But you managed to work through that. You give a couple of examples in the book about how you learned some things from it, and you just kind of drove on at that point. Just talk briefly about what you learned from some of those experiences.
When people know me, they know I talk fondly about my time at Abbott, my 22 years there. I absolutely love it. And, the 30th of the month, they need to keep depositing those checks. So I really love it now. But I had both good leaders and some bad leaders my time there. And, it's easy to Joe to say, you know what, I'm quitting, I'm out. Right? It's easy to do that. However, when you have goals and you're trying to reach those goals, you're not just going to give up because you have a challenge, just because somebody did something that you don't like. Right. And so I had dreams and I had goals, and I knew at the end of this rainbow was going to be these monthly checks for the rest of my life. I couldn't put too much value. I couldn't undervalue that weather.
That's right.
Right. And so I kept my eye on the prize. I knew where I was going and what I wanted. Eventually, I was going to get there. So I dealt with those bad times. Did we have great times? Absolutely. I write about the great times. I list them so that people would understand in life, in a job, in a career, you're going to have great times and you're going to have bad times. You're going to have some good times. You have some not so good times, right? I had a lot of great times, but I also had those challenges. And you learn to deal with those in the moment. Sometimes you have to learn to speak up. Sometimes you have to learn to pick your battles, right? I wasn't always right, and they weren't always right. But you got to know when to pick the battles and which ones to fight and which ones to say, you know what, it's all right. Let's just keep on moving.
You may remember the story from my leadership book about how I met General Colin Powell very briefly when I was in the Army Reserve. It was a wonderful experience. It only took a few minutes, but he was an amazing guy. In his autobiography, he says, when you're a leader, you have two choices. You can stay and fix the problem, or you can leave. There's nothing in between. There's no whining, crying. Fix it or get out. And he said, great leaders stay and they fix the problem. They persevere. And that's a lot of what you did, I think, during your time. I mean, you only had a few of these examples, but you stuck it out. You had the larger goal in mind, and it paid off for you in the end. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, when you first became a district sales manager, I think your book of business was about $33 million. Later, you were a regional sales manager. How did it feel versus being a rep when you had that big of a book? Did you feel more like an owner of the company, or you had a bigger sense of responsibility? Or what were your thoughts when you had that larger financial responsibility?
Yeah, I definitely felt like an owner. One, Abbott makes sure that you understand.
Yes, they do. I made sure you understood.
Yes. Yeah, Joe was the sales leader. He was the president at the time, right? So yeah, we all knew that, hey, we have a responsibility here, right? And we had to take it serious. And so with that, every single day you have to make sure that, just like you're running your house, that you are being responsible and accountable with time, with your reps' time, with how you price things, right? Because if you give too much price away, you're giving company resources away, right? And you want to make it equitable and a win-win for everybody. But as that sales leader, I had to help my reps understand that we have a responsibility, and our first obligation is to the organization. Yes, we want a happy customer, right? But our responsibility is to the organization. And with that, the way that really helps you feel like an owner, Joe, is because you have a team of people that you get to direct and help them grow and expand and all this type of stuff all the time. Just like in your own business, you're helping other people grow and expand. So yeah, I definitely felt like an owner.
All right, we're down to about 2 minutes left. In the last chapter, you talk about the $1 Million Beach House. And as I explained at the outset, for you and Tammy, it's an objective. It was a targeted dream to get there. You still had a lot more things you want to do. But your whole life, from your difficult beginning until now, the beach house represents much more to you than just a really cool place on the water. I know it's about paradigm changing in your family, generational change that you represent in your family. So talk a little bit more, not just the fact that you paid for it and you don't have a mortgage, but what does the $1 Million Beach House mean to you?
Yeah, it means to me that 5-year-old boy who had a dream, the dream is real.
That's right.
It means to me, when I was growing up in North Lake Charles, which, if you don't know Lake Charles, some people call that the poor side of Lake Charles. It means to me, I made it, right? It means to me that young 19 and 17-year-old people that got married, it means that they did some right things to get to where they are today. It means to me going from broke to living a dream life, right? It's amazing how God has blessed me to live this life. I don't know why he picked me, but all the things I had to go through to get here today, that's really what it means to me. Perseverance and overcoming. And you know, I tell people, look, I loved my childhood. I had that one moment at 5-year-old, but I loved my childhood. I loved where I grew up. I didn't know that we were poor at the time, but now when I look back, man, I really know that, right? It means also to me, Joe, when we were cutting those yards, and again, we call them white people yard, right? And it looked like to me big houses back then, and I drive by them today and I go, No, that house not big. Right. But that's what all that stuff means to me. So I absolutely am excited and blessed to be here today.
Well, I think I know why you were picked. You know, you're a messenger, really. And this book is about the message that you present to other people. And if you look at the business you're in today with the LaFleur Leadership Institute and the work you do with young people, you're a messenger for this story. And you were picked for a reason. It's really a wonderful thing to see. So if you haven't bought the book, it's going to be out this week. Get it? $1 Million Beach House of Marrying an Extraordinary Life. So Cedrick, thanks for joining us on your own show tonight. Great to be here.
Yes, thank you very much, Joe, for being the facilitator of this. I put the link if you want to buy the book. I put the link there. If you are a corporate executive, you know what? Buy 10 of those for your team. You don't need it, right? It's a book not necessarily just about the $1 Million Beach House. It's about understanding how to overcome, how to persevere, how to set goals, how to set pace, stay on course. Don't get sidetracked by all these other things, right? So there are a lot of learning lessons in there. But I can't end this call without saying thank you to you. You didn't have to, and you did. You offered to do this. You didn't have to say, you know what, I'm going to be a friend to Cedrick, and you do it every day. And I appreciate that. I want you to know that. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I got to wear a tux on a day when it's 107 degrees outside in Arizona.
Yeah, Joe said, "Hey, Cedrick, why don't we wear tuxedos?" Now, I was like, "Well, Joe, you're the facilitator, so is it?" I see Ken Thornton out there. Ken, now I wasn't gonna put a tuxedo on, but I can't say no to Joe.
You look good, though. Well, thanks for having us here tonight, Cedrick. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, thank you guys for tuning in as well. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you gain something. I will be autographing your book. So Amazon has promised me I'm getting them this week. I'll be shipping them out autographed and in a special customized box just for you. So thank you again. Bless you. And you guys have a great evening.
Good night.
Good night.